History of Far Cry series. Far Cry is a franchise of first-person shooter games, all of which have been published by Ubisoft. The first game, Far Cry, was developed by Crytek to premiere their CryEngine software, and released in March 2004. Subsequently, Ubisoft obtained the rights to the franchise and the bulk of the development is handled by Ubisoft Montreal with assistance from other Ubisoft satellite studios. The following games in the series have used the Ubisoft modified version of the CryEngine, the Dunia engine, allowing for open-world gameplay. There have been 5 main games in the series, along with 3 standalone expansions. The first game, initially developed for Microsoft Windows, also saw a number of ports to video game consoles. The Far Cry games, due to the history of their development, do not have any significant shared narrative elements, but instead share a theme of placing the player in a wilderness environment where they must help fight against one or more despots that control the region, as well as surviving against wild animals that roam the open spaces. The Far Cry games feature a robust single-player campaign, with later titles offering cooperative campaign support. The games also offer competitive multiplayer options and the ability for users to edit the game's maps for these matches. The Far Cry games have generally been well received and are considered commercial successes. Ubisoft reports that, through 2014, lifetime sales of the Far Cry franchise has exceeded 20 million units. 1.
This is Africa, and in this place of beauty, there is an ugliness that infects the land. He's called a jackal. He has turned a brother against brother, and run the rivers red with their blood for his own profit. How can such a man be stopped?
The main Far Cry games are first-person shooters with action-adventure elements, whereas the first Far Cry and its spin-offs were typical FPS with discrete levels. Far Cry 2 and the subsequent games have adapted an open-world style of gameplay, with main story and side missions and optional quests to complete. There are minimal narrative elements or chronology between the games. Instead, the Far Cry games have generally shared the theme of taking the player to a lawless frontier where values and laws of today are non-functional, along with elements of having to survive in the wilderness, including hunting and crafting. The player often needs to work with freedom fighters attempting to regain control of a region from a ruling party, and may have to pit different sides of a conflict against each other through their actions. Some of the series' games have been more rooted in realistic conflicts, while others have involved elements of the supernatural or science fiction. Ubisoft Montreal, the principal developers of the series, do consider that all games share the same common fictional universe, and have reused some minor characters to maintain that, but otherwise anticipate each game can be enjoyed as a standalone title without knowledge of the other games.
Hey, Doug! Check this out.
Are those real? You getting this? You recording? Oh, yeah. My man Jason brings the heat.
Hey, put that down. Go now. Go.
Okay, we got it. We're leaving.
Let's go, man.
What a dick.
Okay, but
That's
this is the
it.
last one. Cheers, guys!
Cheers!
Hey, Doug.
That's what I'm talking about.
It's fucking easy, man. Just fucking pull the fucking trigger.
What do you want from me, man?
Let's go, man. Shoot me.
No.
Come on, shoot me, motherfucker. Let's go.
Shoot me, motherfucker! Come on!
Oh, fuck. I've never seen a bigger bunch of pussies in my life. Hey, listen, mama. The bitch is worth a lot of money, but you and your fucking asshole friend, you're not even worth a bullet.
Come on, man. What are you?
The first Far Cry game was developed by the German studio Crytek, and premiered their CryEngine software. One of Crytek's goals with the CryEngine was to be able to render realistic outdoor spaces with large viewing distances, which was a unique feature compared with other game engines at the time of its release. The CryEngine was originally demonstrated as a tech demo at Electronic Entertainment Expo, 1999 under the name Exile. Dinosaur Island specifically aimed at NVIDIA graphics processors. The demo allowed the user to explore a virtual tropical island populated with dinosaurs, showcasing the size of the virtual world that the CryEngine could handle. Following E3 1999, they secured a deal with NVIDIA to distribute Exile alongside all NVIDIA cards as benchmarking software, as at the time the CryEngine was the most demanding game engine on the market. Ubisoft made a deal with Crytek to build out Exile into a full AAA title, and obtained publishing rights for this title. Far Cry released in March 2004 for Microsoft Windows to critical praise and strong sales, with over 730,000 units sold in the first 4 months. Following Far Cry's release, Crytek, wanting to show that CryEngine had other applications, signed a deal in July 2004 to develop a gaming franchise with publisher Electronic Arts CA, a direct competitor to Ubisoft. This franchise became the Crysis series, and through which Crytek continued to improve their CryEngine. With Crytek unable to work with them, Ubisoft assigned its studio Ubisoft Montreal to help port the title to the various game consoles through the Far Cry Instincts and Far Cry Vengeance titles. These titles required Ubisoft Montreal to rework much of the game as the consoles at this point in time were not as powerful as personal computers, and could not handle the wide open levels without performance problems. These games created more linear levels from the original Far Cry, added campaigns and multiplayer modes, and in some cases, changed the game's narrative to less realistic outcomes. In March 2006, Ubisoft acquired all rights to the Far Cry series and a perpetual license for the CryEngine version used in the development of Far Cry. Ubisoft Montreal remained the principal studio developing all future Far Cry games. Far Cry 2 was announced by Ubisoft in July 2007, and featured 2 significant changes from the previous Far Cry games. First, it premiered the use of the Dunia engine, a modified form of the licensed CryEngine by Ubisoft Montreal. The Dunia engine was developed alongside Far Cry 2 to make a fully open-world game, as well as adding realistic physics and destroyable environments. Second, rather than continuing in the narrative of the first Far Cry, it created a more open-ended narrative, featuring 9 playable characters and the means for the player to create their own stories with the other non-playable characters in the game with an advanced artificial intelligence system. Part of the reason the narrative from Far Cry was dropped was that its main character Jack Carver was deemed unlikable by audiences, citation needed, and that the ending of the game, particularly with the changes made for Instincts and Vengeance, took a significant turn into science fiction, something that the developers wanted to avoid with Far Cry 2. Ubisoft also recognized that through the various console versions that players would be tired of the tropic setting, as well as fearing that Crytek's project with EA was also set in a tropic location, and thus opted to change the locale to the plains of Africa. Far Cry 2 was released in October 2008. and was critically praised and commercially successful, with over 2.9 million in sales by 2009. However, the game's director, Clint Hocking, noted that internally, much of the design of Far Cry 2 was haphazard. Far Cry 2 had a polarizing reception from players over some of the gameplay features that were implemented to make the game feel diegetic and immerse the player into the world. Some of these disputed mechanics included the random onset of malaria that would impact the character's vision and movement until they obtained and took medicine for it, a weapon decay system that would cause guns picked up from enemies to wear down and break overuse, military checkpoints that a player could clear out but which would become repopulated with enemies minutes later, and the game's buddy system, where the player could call a selected non-player character to help their character in battle, but only for a short while and would not be available until the player reached a safe house to rest. Reproduction work for Far Cry 3 had reportedly started just after Far Cry 2 was shipped, with plans to keep it as a narrative sequel, but in the few years that followed, many of the development leads for Far Cry 2 left the studio. The project had a significant shift of locale, returning to a tropical island theme similar to Far Cry while retaining the open-world nature of Far Cry 2. They also looked to keep the key elements of Far Cry 2's open world that work but add in more features to make it feel like a living world but with purpose behind how they designed it. This led to the development of Dunia Engine 2 to implement some open-world features such as weather system, which premiered in Far Cry 3. Several of the questionable gameplay elements of Far Cry 2 were eliminated. Further, to make this world meaningful, they eliminated the multiple player characters and instead provided one character that they could write a strong narrative around. Far Cry 3 was formally announced in 2011 and released in November 2012. Though Far Cry 3 presented some controversial elements within its narrative, it still received positive reviews and had sold more than 10 million units by 2014. Both Far Cry 4, announced in May 2014 and released in November 2014, and Far Cry 5, announced in May 2017 for a 2018 release, follow Far Cry 3's approach, adding refinements in gameplay and engine technology. Far Cry 3, Blood Dragon was released in May 2013, following its announcement by Ubisoft on the previous April Fool's Day. The game, a standalone title, was an experiment release developed by Dean Nevins that worked atop the existing Far Cry 3 assets, reskinning some of the game's existing maps and geometry. It took a tongue-in-cheek approach to the culture of the 1980s. It too was a commercial success with more than 1 million units sold. Its success led Ubisoft to make a similar reskin title built off the map from Far Cry 4 rather than releasing major expansions for the game. Ubisoft allowed fans to vote for a setting they wanted to see a Far Cry set in, and led to the development of Far Cry Primal. And Far Cry 5 was released in 2008.
We must atone!
Something is coming. You can feel it, can't you? You can feel that we are creeping towards the edge. I know that you are out there. And I know that you are in pain. But my children, I'm here to tell you that suffering is a choice, and you can choose a better path. We want you, we accept you, and we will take you, willingly or not. And some of you may fight, but in the end, you will thank us. I am your father, and you are my children.
Upon us! I shall lead you to the gate! For you are my children, and I am your father!
We were just kids when the bombs dropped, and the world went to shit.
Far Cry 5 is set in modern-day Montana and a fictional Hope County. The player takes on the role of a sheriff's deputy who becomes entangled in a violent conflict between a doomsday cult called Eden's Gate led by the father Joseph Seed and his siblings, and the resisting residents of Hope County who have seen their friends and family taken or killed by the cult. Announced in May 2017, the game was released on March 27, 2018 worldwide. Far Cry New Dawn is a narrative sequel to Far Cry 5 that was released on February 15, 2019. The game is set 17 years after the events of Far Cry 5 and follows the survivors of a nuclear war as they attempt to rebuild their community.
The only currency left in this world is power. We're gonna take everything from you, starting with your home. And if we can't take it, we'll break it.
Led us into the new world. I thought that it would be glorious. I was wrong.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe my channel.